Welcome to the How to Become series, which is a series with British Fashion Council and Wonderland magazine. My name is Toni-Blaze and I'm editor-in-chief of Wonderland, and I'm joined by the gorgeous, the talented BFC New Wave Creative, stylist. I mean, the list goes on. Solange Franklin Reed. I'm very, very happy that you've joined me on Zoom. I know we're all zoomed out. We just said that a minute ago. No, I just want to thank you for just coming onto the platform for How to Become series. And yeah, we're going to delve into your journey. A lot of gems will be dropped, some advice is going to be dropped. So I'm super, super excited. How are you feeling?
Oh, thank you for having me, first of all, and for that wonderfully kind introduction. Today I feel good. Just empowered by the energy that's in my city. I'm currently in New York. It's been a long journey in quarantine, but yeah, today I feel okay.
I know, that's all you can really reply, isn't it? I feel like it's one of those questions where it's like, if I really dig deep and give you like X, Y, Z, we might be here for the whole time talking about how you feel.
I'm not good at glossing it over. I really am not. And I think that creatives are we're going to say enough. Like, we're going to tell y'all how it really is, and not you, but the folks.
In terms of just like staying creative during this time, how's it been for you?
Oh my goodness. I feel like creativity has seemed out of reach for me, to be honest. I feel like some people create to stay sane, and I feel like I'm somebody who needs to feel sane to create.
I mean, I love that you I feel like a lot of times you see on Instagram where it's like, I've just been like super busy, like I've learned a new language, I've planned my next 5 years, I've done this, I've done that. And it's like, it's so important for you, not you, but it's so important that you kind of mention on just your mental as well, and just delving back into that kind of space, making sure that's strong. So when you go back into like the industry, shooting and all these things in between, you feel, mentally ready, which is so important. I remember we were just talking, I was saying I've just gone and done my first shoot, and I thought I couldn't even remember how to style. I was like, oh my God, I don't even know what, like, does this look good? Like, I live at home still, so I was like, me and my mum were like just looking through the clothes, and she was loving it, like, because usually I don't obviously get all the stuff sent to me sometimes, whatever. But anyway, we're just loving going through it. She's like, maybe put that with that. And I'm like, wait, am I styling this or you
Yes,
are?
Mom.
Like my brain was freezing at like 2 a.m. pre-styling. I was like, wait, you're actually good at this. You're really good. So no, it's definitely going to be a weird transition. So I just love how you mentioned about mental, because people sometimes kind of overlook that aspect of themselves. They think they need to just jump straight into work, when it's like, this time can be used also for reflection. So I want to take it quite back, and this is like not a big question, but more so like, what was it like growing up for you?
Oh my gosh. I grew up in the middle of the country, Des Moines, Iowa. That's the closest big city is Chicago, for folks who aren't from the US. And growing up for me was, mostly really good. I felt protected. I felt like I could explore creative avenues, but that they weren't ever going to lead to a career in creativity. Mm-hmm. And so I think it was moving to the East Coast, closer to New York, that made me realize that this was something that you can get paid to do. And that you don't have to be Van Gogh, that the only type of art isn't fine art. I felt like there was this hunger for anything big, like the city, big fashion, big music. And so I felt like I was constantly seeking out just music videos and magazines, which thankfully were readily available to me in the middle of Iowa, where I grew up. And so I felt like I've just always been immersed in an outside world, while also maintaining a rich inner life for creativity and just thinking about what could be and like how I could change my surroundings. And actually, Simon Doonan, I once sat next to him at a dinner, and he was like, all the best people in fashion come from crap towns. And I would never call where I come from a crap town, but he was like, just the idea of like, we're the dreamers, we're the people that want to push and really want to be there. And so I think that helped me wanting to be a part of something bigger.
And both of your parents are academics, and obviously you studied pre-med in college. What was that moment that you kind of just was like, yeah, I kind of want to be about the glitz and the glam. I want to be about fashion. I want to kind of get into fashion more.
I always loved fashion, and I don't think that there was one moment, but I do recall I had an experiment in my biochemistry lab and I was waiting for the results to come through. And I was dreaming of how to redesign my lab coat and like make fashionable goggles. And I was like, I don't know if patients want me to be thinking about this while I'm pursuing this. So I was like, maybe I should be exploring other avenues. And just because you can doesn't mean you should. I feel like that's a lesson I learned from my mother. It's like, just because you can does not mean you should. And I think I felt validated by the fact that I felt like I was capable of doing more than one thing, but that I should really pursue what interesting to me, like the most captivating.
How did it feel kind of taking that leap and that transition in terms of like, were you kind of nervous? Were you anxious? Did you feel like you had the right tools? Like you knew that it was about maybe assisting and then moving on to like something bigger than that? Like, how did you approach that situation?
I was terrified, first of all. I went from like a very clear schedule of how to succeed, which medicine is. It's like they tell you exactly what to do, the prerequisite courses, then the like next 14 years of your life are mapped out, which is kind of reassuring for some folks, and I think myself included. And so making the switch to fashion, it was like I did a lot of research. I talked to a lot of people. I mean, I'll show my age. This was like the start of blogs and the internet and just transparency, not the internet, but transparency in terms of people talking about how they made it. And so hearing multiple people's stories, I was like, it was actually reading Eva Chen's profile, I think on the Teen Vogue blog, that I was like, oh, she has a similar background to me and she's making it. And it's glitz and glam, but there's also meaning behind it. Like I never really divided glitz and glam from meaning. And especially for people of color in the industry, I think that, you know, fashion expressions of self just mean so much more than something frivolous, even though we should be entitled to frivolity too. But
no, I think it, you know, you balance it out. You are passionate and crazy about like look 22 or whatever, but on the flip side, you know it's much bigger, and you know, and you can control your cast, and you can control who you work with, you can control what images you put out, you can control what narrative of representation you want to put into the world. So it goes beyond you being like, oh my god, yes, they just confirmed that look. It's actually no, it's like now we end up creating images that hopefully we hope that stand the test of time, but then we also hope that, you know, younger versions of us are looking at this being like, you know, seeing these images and being like, damn, this looks like me, or this is really cool, or whatever it is kind of thing. And do you have any like early memories of fashion as a child?
Okay, so because I'm from Iowa, which is near farms but not on farms, I feel like I'll just always have an affinity for overalls. So I'm like, overalls, I'd wear my little overalls as a tomboy, but then I would make sure I had like ruffle underwear underneath or something. So it was always about a hidden message and pushing the boundaries of just what people expected of you. I mean, my earliest memories, I think, of how I got into the idea of experimenting with fashion was thrifting. That's how I could afford to shop and think about agency and like just try on something crazy from the 40s mixed with something from the 90s and see how that looks on you, and it costs $5. And so, you know, the idea of accessibility and experimentation, I feel like are kind of my fondest memories.
Do you have any, looking back, any early inspirations in terms of maybe like stylists or designers that also kind of drew you into the industry more when you were like starting out too?
I think going back to my Iowa roots, just like the dreaming of just magazine imagery just being like plastered all over my walls. The Lauryn Hill or Vibe or Honey magazine, you know, you're like obsessed with Missy Elliott. And then I came to find out later that June Ambrose was behind that. I was a fan of the work, but I didn't know who was behind the work. I didn't even know to look to see who was, you know, behind the scenes creating these images. I just knew to look at the credits. The images that were on my wall were like Lauryn Hill, Missy Elliott. And so the stylists that I found out later that I admired were like June Ambrose, Misa Hilton, Adada Jones. I didn't know she was behind much of the Tommy Hilfiger imagery or Aaliyah's imagery. And, you know, I'm from the Midwest, so baby girl was everything. I didn't realize, inadvertently, I found out later once I was in the industry, who was attached to the imagery that was inspiring me.
Even though everyone always generally says that, but like when you actually deep it and you think of like Missy Elliott Beat Me 911 video, and you're like, this was art. This was like, even like that, and the representation of like, you know, like Black women as Barbie dolls and being in that kind of space, it was like, at that time would have been pretty like radical, pretty revolutionary in terms of imagery. Growing up, you're like, this is cool. And then when you look back, you're like, wait, this was like before it was shifting stuff then. And in terms of just like kind of getting more into like the assisting sort of question. So obviously you assisted fashion editor Giovanni Battaglia. How was that experience for you?
It was incredible. So I assisted her for almost 6 years, I believe, maybe 5. And I got to travel the world with her and just be immersed in somebody else's vision, I think is really valuable as an assistant. The most important part about being a stylist is the apprentice era. And I think I assisted like 30 stylists or something like that. You don't have to do that. You could just assist like 2 people for multiple years. Working with Giovanna, it was just truly being immersed in, she was an editor for Vogue Japan and for W. So I got to straddle the markets and just know, the difference between pulling the same looks for the Asian market versus the American market. Just the idea of understanding how to inhabit somebody else's vision, I think is really valuable because it makes you a better storyteller. You can inhabit a character in a better way, but also just seeing the amount of collaboration, the amount of prep work that went into, the massive editorials. Back then, they still had budgets to do massive editorials in kind of uninhibited ways. I feel like I'm like the last generation of assistants who's got to see some of that old world glamour of like, shoot Peter Lindbergh in the south of France, but then also starting to get into the budgetary restraints of we can't send 80 trunks to South Africa anymore, which is understandable. Yes, I just feel like I learned how to run a business, but also how to conduct myself with other creatives and just collaborating between makeup and hair and balancing the magazine's needs versus the photographer's needs and your own needs. So just truly being a collaboration.
That already ticks boxes in terms of why was it important. Like people don't realize, I think with assisting, especially in styling, it's so important. You can go to fashion school, you can, do all these things, but like you actually learn on ground in experience. They can't teach you, like actually even when I went to, like, for example, I was at St. Martin's, I never knew what like a pull letter was and like how to type up a request and draft it. They don't teach you this. They're just kind of like, find your aesthetic and like, just explore that. And then they don't teach you the actual like, no, okay, I found it.
I'm envious of that. Don't discount it.
I found it now, but okay, how do I make money from that now? Until you actually go in the industry and experience moments and all these things, that's when you actually learn. And then just in terms of like advice and stuff, for anyone watching that wants to kind of land a good assisting role, like what advice would you give them?
I think what people look for in assistants are just anybody who can be indispensable to them. So many different levels and types of assistants. I think that's really helpful to know because I think you can look at somebody and think, I'll never be like that type of person who can send the organized pull letters, send the requests for the clothing and do the hand-sewn looks, represent my boss in these corporate meetings. Some people have the talent to do all of that, and some people are only, sewing a million buttons on set, and that's okay. There's room for everybody. And so I think figure out what you're good at and where your strengths are, whether that came from Central St. Martin and what you got taught there, or, just figuring out how you can be of assistance to somebody. And because they need logistical help, I say that this job is 80% logistics and 20% creativity, which I think people are surprised to hear. You think we're just making mood boards all day, or some people get to do, but yeah, you're not just making mood boards and dreaming and then stepping on set and the magic happens. There's a lot of grit. There's a lot that goes into it, and you need solid foundation, which are the assistants. I'd say just professionalism, and then looking to see at the millions of different types of stylists and what it is that they might need. Somebody that shoots for American Vogue is going to have different needs than somebody who shoots for Wonderland, most likely because of limitations, freedoms, and just how they can express themselves and who they can bring on to help them enlist that vision.
And then in terms of just now moving away from assisting, when did you kind of realize that you kind of were ready to kind of blossom on your own?
That was definitely a hard thing to decide, just watching to see how other people do it. And, if there's a certain amount of years that you wait. I think, first of all, I try to talk about this as much as I can, savings. Some people are very privileged and they don't have to think about it, and God bless you. But this job takes a lot of cash, cash on hand, and also credit. So you might want to repair your credit, and leave it there, and stack your coins. Like, you need to have reserves. So I think use your assistant years to save and to be learning creatively, also to lay the foundation of your business, because creativity is free in many ways, but running the business of creativity absolutely is not. And I wish that I knew more about that. Because even managing teams of just how to make a shoot happen, you still don't understand what it takes to sustain a salary, especially in the cities that fashion is the most alive, industrious. So like the London, Paris, New York, you're gonna need a lot of cash on hand.
How do you feel like assisting kind of helped you develop your aesthetic, like your own personal aesthetic?
Just as I was saying before, like delving into somebody else's vision, I think is really helpful because it just helps you build characters and know how to step outside of maybe your immediate comfort zone. I think the other benefit of working for several different stylists, so obviously I worked with Giovanna for the longest time, but I freelanced for Patty Wilson, Joe McKenna, just people with, the greats, but with very different aesthetics. So you can look at the same runway show and be like, look 14 is for Gio, look 21 is for Edward, look 33 is for Patty, but like hold the hat. And you need to understand that's part of developing a vision, is just knowing what a vision is. And then I think developing your own aesthetic is just being in touch with what motivates you and what you're drawn to. And I think when you're exposed to things that you wouldn't have normally gone into, you can be. It's just like going to an art exhibit and seeing something you've never seen before. You're like, oh, that just exposed a whole nother rabbit hole of wonder that I had. And I think that's also why it's important to be inspired by things that aren't just fashion. You shouldn't just be chasing the trends. You should be thinking about, how does this fine artist affect me? How does this poet affect me? And that might be different than how your boss did or handled their art. So yeah, I feel like that was important for me.
And just, I want to kind of talk about like in terms of like balancing like, the work you do with editorials and then the work you do with clients. How has that been for you? Because I feel like people don't realize how busy it is to, shoot an editorial on a Tuesday and then maybe you've got someone going to an award show on the Wednesday and then you've got all these things in between Monday, Thursday, Friday, whatever it is. And we are not days off either for us. You are doing things.
Work week.
It's definitely a work 7-day week. How do you kind of balance all of that?
As we're talking about like the financial side of things, just figuring out what it takes in order to pursue your creative endeavors. So you might not only do editorial, which I completely understand. Why not dream all day? Those editorials cost money ultimately. Like typically, you end up net negative. And so you need to have taken on a certain number of campaigns or dressing if they pay in order to fund that. And also just for, your own enjoyment. You might I love working with brands. I love being a brand consultant. I love seeing their vision come to life on the runway or in a lookbook shoot. And so just balancing all that, again, comes back to team, somebody that can be your foundation to help you hold it down. But we just have to use so many different compartments of our brain where you're like, okay, I need to think about this size 8 model that I'm dressing on Tuesday, this 00 on Thursday, and these 8 different mood boards that are being thrown at me. And I think it's just about taking care of yourself. And I think it's about saying yes to projects that you feel enthusiastic about, because that's the way that you're going to be able to preserve and maintain energy to do that. And hopefully you have the liberty to do so, because I know some people say yes to jobs that they never talk about in order to fund their lifestyle.
Yeah, no, it's true. Sometimes if you do have the liberty to be able to just say yes to things you are passionate about, it doesn't really feel that much like work. Sometimes when you have that job, maybe you've accepted it and you actually didn't really want to do it, but you need obviously the funds or whatever. I'm sure you could probably begrudgingly make that mood board and make that, even if you're like, oh, there it is attached. And you're like, but here it is.
That brings me back to like the team portion, because maybe you're not inspired by the mood board of the shoot that you have on Friday, but you know that you get to see your friend that does the hair and the makeup and the nails that you then get to see on your editorial in another week. Mm-hmm. And it's just about the camaraderie and coming together. And I think that's meaningful. And then when you start to think about the stakes of what folks are going to see in the world, you're like, okay, I care about this. So. And
in terms of like British Fashion Council, New Wave Creative 2019, obviously you're on that list. How does it feel to have, an accolade that connects to your career?
It's so humbling, and I feel like the highest form of praise I think that any of us could want is to be respected by your peers. And I think that that's one of my few and only goals. It just makes you feel, very seen, and I appreciate that.
And you've worked with obviously some of the most in-demand faces, across the creative, music, acting, just Tracy Ellis Ross, Solange, Dazzy Beats, Kerry Washington. I mean, each moment when you work with like a Solange compared to like a Kerry Washington, how do you feel that kind of pushes your creativity?
That's a great question. I think that takes us to the world of bridging the gap between total fantasy and reality. I mean, I know you do dressing as well. You're not dealing with a model where you can say, I'm going to apply my vision to you. You know, they come in fully inhabiting their identity. And so I think you start with who they are and frame them. And I think that's the most important thing that we can do. And I think that that's compassionate. I feel like you're just forced to like insert a humane vision of whatever your mood board is. Solange is not going to say yes to something that she doesn't believe in. And that is the type of person that you want to work with because they have a point of view. You know, they have a vision and they respect your vision, and that's why you're collaborating together. And just highlighting those various identities, I think, is what's challenging and exciting. And just, yeah, being tasked with framing them in a beautiful, uplifting, and hopefully somewhat new way, but ultimately an empowering way. I think that's the most important thing.
Like you said, with models, you kind of bring them around, like, that's your vision. Whereas when you all have clients and celebrities or whatever, it's like, you may have one thing that you're super obsessed about for someone, and then it's like, it may shock and surprise you that it doesn't align with maybe like talent or whatever you're working with, but then it pushes you. Sometimes you might get obsessed about a vision and you're like, this is for you, this is going to work, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, no. And you're like, damn, I thought this was quite a good idea. Like, okay, drawing board then, all right, just give me a few seconds to kind of read it, see how I feel. Just, you know, for kind of more into like advice, you know, in terms of like agency representation and finding an agent and stuff, what advice would you give to any like stylists that are kind of like looking to go down that route?
I think definitely make sure that your book represents who you are now and like where you want to go. If there's anything that's in your book that you're unsure of, take it out. It's better to have fewer shoots that you feel like is a concise version of you. I would definitely recommend reviewing your portfolio, which means that you should have done a number of test shoots and hopefully you've been published by the time that you're looking for an agent. Definitely recommend that if there's anything that you're unsure about, to edit it out, because you want a concise vision of, you know, what represents you, because you're putting your best self forward to these people, right? And you need to convey to them what your vision is so that they can convey to clients who you are. It's not shady, but advice that I was given was to make sure that, especially if you're not used to pitching yourself, which is understandable for visual folks, that you should go to agencies that you do not necessarily think that you're aligned with, and give yourself that practice round, because, you know, the stakes are still real. They still know folks in the industry, and you might meet somebody that could recommend you for a job. You might just know in your heart that that's not where you want to be, and that's okay. And it's good to have that practice, because then when the stakes are really high and real and you get to the place that you want to be, you'll be ready to present yourself in the way that you want to be seen. And I think that was really helpful and valuable for me.
I mean, that's so important to note in terms of like testing the waters of these things. And obviously, you know, stylists, freelancers always have this major agency that they want to go for, and they think, I'm not accepting anything in between this. It's got to be, you know, this moment with this agency. But sometimes, like you said, it's good to kind of test those waters and see what you don't want. If you haven't been in an experience before, how do you know, how do you know if an agent does XYZ, that's what you want, or if you didn't even have that experience before, kind of thing. More fun questions. What is it that you love about your job?
I mean, the fashion, the glitz, the glam, but I really love the collaboration. It's the people I've met from all over the world. That's what I miss about Fashion Week and getting to travel and, you know, shoot in London, whatever it is. Even if you work with somebody one time in the desert in New Mexico, you forged a bond forever, forever. And then you have that picture that lives on forever that hopefully you like, but at the very least you have the experience, and it held a beautiful moment for you. And it's a moment of growth, and you will grow with the team that you work with. It's incredible to watch your peers grow. And that was one of the fun things about BFC and the New Wave. It's just to be like, yo, remember where we were 5 years ago? Like, remember when we were assisting together in the trenches? And, you know, now they see us. So the come up, the collaboration, and of course the fashion, you know, living for the true artists that you have the privilege to collaborate with. That's what I love.
Like, do you remember your very first kind of, I don't want to use the word major, but just one of you're like, damn, that was a really good moment?
I think it's like you said earlier, I'm not great at looking back. But I think A shoot that I've been thinking about even just in quarantine is my Africa Rising shoot, which was like when I first went on my own, and it was with Ajak Dang and Maria Borges, and I shot all designers from the diaspora, you know, just that true collaboration of like why I do the work that I do. Yes, glitz glam, but also to center women and people of color and underrepresented minorities. That's why I do what I do. And like to make that connection between the, you know, the family that we have in the diaspora. And so that was just a shoot where I got to do all the things that I love between the team and the clothes and the models. And it was just vibrant and free, and like before restrictions on, you know, what advertisers are included in the shoot. And I just want to make sure that I keep capturing that spirit in my work. We're not going to reemerge and do the same things we were doing before. That seems insane. So it's like, what do you want to keep from before, and what do you want to, you know, transform?
Yeah. You know, any young stylists watching that kind of they don't really know what to like have in their kit, or little things like that. What you're kind of like, oh, my favorite thing is top tips.
Well, first of all, you need to take aside an assistant and be like, tell me everything that's in your kit, because they should have a little list. I'd say that's the number one thing. Show up to set, you have double-sided tape and safety pins, you can work magic. And then like a more secret tool would be like the hole punch that you use for an extra hole in belts and shoes, because those models have skinny ankles. What's your secret kit tip?
Top tip's my secret. No, do you know what? It's a really random one, but like I'm always drawn to like really dramatic, crazy, or whatever things. I'm always drawn to like things that are extra as hell. Even if it's jewelry, like sometimes I'll like do a cordon and it's like even down to everything is just extra. And my top tip would always have your basic. So even if it's a basic diamond stud, or it's like you know, a basic like black trouser, or things that kind of like a look that you're creating that you think you want to be so OTT, and you do it on set in real life, and you're like, this might not be what I wanted to do. I always have that kind of basic thing you can slide in terms of it. Like I said, if it was like an earring, or if it's like some sort of basic trouser, or whatever it is, those little things go a long way. Because I know I've been on shoots where I've gone a bit too OTT. I'm like, I love look 24, I want and 2, and there's all this drama that I know I want. I've got there, and I'm like, what?
I need to take that. That is excellent advice, and that goes to clients too, because they will be like, I want McQueen for this, and then you get to set and they're like, you don't have a Hanes tee? And you're like,
I wanted to ask you, what is it you love about London and London Fashion Week?
Oh my gosh, as New Yorkers, we just have like unbridled love for London, because y'all are like uninhibited. You embrace your artistry. Of course, I love New York. I love our designers, but I feel like we are more economically motivated. And, you know, that could come down to public policy of like not as good of a safety net. But I do feel like it's just the vibrancy that we always talk about that London has, that is like a slight renegade, true to heritage, I guess, whatever that is. Like if that's your Nigerian heritage, I just feel like, you guys embrace yourselves, and I appreciate that.
And in terms of just like the hustle and bustle of shows, like what do you miss about kind of going to shows?
I mean, I am like a deep introvert, so I have to get excited about going to shows, and then once I'm there, I'm like, why did I need convincing to come out for this? The energy, I mean, I think it's just, you know, the palpable energy that I don't know how you recreate it. Just seeing the set design up close, the music, you know, having a ruffle brush your shin on the runway, like just that tactile excitement, I think is something that we miss. And then the camaraderie, because part of what's so amazing about assisting multiple people is hopefully you get a chance to travel, and then you have friends in Paris and Madrid, and we all come together, and you get to have a big hug behind, you know, backstage in London. That's really special. And I think it's one of the best things about the job is you expand your geography of who your family is.
How do you feel the future of fashion shows is going to go?
Oh my gosh, yeah, I definitely don't have a crystal ball. And no, but I think that we'll hopefully be more just tech-centric, I guess. I think it'll be both, okay? I think that there'll be more like bringing things back to a showroom and coming to be personally invited to you know, a major designer showroom, which might make it a bit more exclusive for, there's fewer editors involved. There's more of an intimate experience, bringing it back to old school shows. I feel like the democratization that people have experienced in terms of witnessing shows, I don't think that that can go anywhere, especially now, like post pandemic, just like people, we need consumers in order to help us drive away like where we're going. And so I think broadcasting, like I think I'm excited to see what happens for Digital Fashion Week. I think that's really exciting. Hanifa, I love what she did. Like I loved what she did, because I was like, you're merging this world of tech in a not creepy way, where it's not like, is that an like animal human robot thing what's happening? You just had the physical form of a human, and I loved that. And I think that that could also relinquish some younger designers from, you know, the supposed limitations of like size runs, right? So you could show a bigger body in order to have size inclusivity without actually costing you as much in terms of fabrication and sampling. So I feel like that could be an interesting wave of the future. And just like, what could that be to have like a digital chat room where you get to kind of like watch this animation, like this form, interact with this form as like somebody who's not an industry insider. I think that could be really fun.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an exciting time. I know we went through this weird like sorrow moment where I was like, the end of fashion shows, and we were like, and I think now we're all being like, no, like digital and physical fashion shows, what we're hoping anyway, will exist together, you know? Like it's the same way with like print media. Everyone went through this whole thing like print is dead, like digital is gonna take over everything, and then it's like, no, we actually can still, thankfully, touch wood, still coexist with digital and print as well. And just kind of going back to the industry and stuff, how do you feel the industry has changed in terms of like diversity and stuff?
I think we're going to see accountability. I think we're going to see coalitions. I think that's the future. Yeah, I think there's an unstoppable force right now where people are motivated, have been provided more access, because we started with representation, right? And then we have moved to inclusion, and there's a huge difference in power structure and like who has access and who can shift or shake the table. And so I think the people who now have a seat at the table are ready to make sure we don't get lost. And I think that it's a time to rebuild. And when you have fissures in systems where the typically privileged folks are no longer benefiting, it leaves room for change. And I just hope that we move in a way that, yeah, it's just truly inclusive and is not, yeah, it's just motivating, I guess.
I definitely agree with you. I definitely feel like there's this kind of energy brewing that it's like integrity first. Like, you know, you are, no matter how many brands may post about a certain thing, whatever it is, people are now seeing through when things aren't authentically that message or that voice. And now we're moving into a place where it's like, you know, if I'm gonna, even now during the, like buying into fashion now, you want to buy into brands with integrity. You want to see like, what have they done in the past? What have they done before? Does it feel like an authentic voice? I think we're moving into even new buying trends when it comes to like fashion industry, in terms of like, I'm not just going to buy things for the sake of buying it. You know, I want to, where did the brand come from? Who started, you know, you kind of want to know the story, and people are moving into this, like you said, coalition kind of like accountability, but also just, yeah, like real integrity. We're not just seeing someone being like, I support this. You're like, great, cool, add to cart. I love that brand because, you know, they're like, you know, they have a diverse campaign. Like, it goes beyond that now. Hiring is what I think is going to kind of also, is going to be hopefully, I hope anyway, a shake up in terms of like, you know, like you said, who are the people at this table? Who can make decisions? Who are these decision makers in HQ and all these bigger brands? I think now we're moving, you know, thanks, we've got people who are diverse in campaigns now. Now we're like, okay, what's next now? Who are actually making these decisions? I think we're going to move into that space even much more now. So I do think I think it's a very positive way to look at it, definitely. I think we've still some way to go, but I think it's definitely, well, I hope it's definitely like working in the right direction.
We're educated optimists, right? Like, I feel like people are drawn to this industry because we're optimists, but I think being women of color, we also know what reality is. And so we know how to merge those two things, and we want to make it better for the next generation.
No, you've had such an amazing journey, and just your body of work. There's still more, of course, you're going to do, but in terms of like other creative mediums, would you ever explore anything else?
I think the closest thing would be costume design. Yeah, I think that's just an opportunity to delve into like a long-term project, because so many of our projects, people don't know, might have a lifeline of 2 weeks or 2 days. And I think it'd be really fun to sit at a writer's table and have like 6 months to develop wardrobe or something like that. That's something I haven't done.
Yeah, that's definitely a dream of mine too. And
Yeah.
6 months is a long time. So, you know, 6 months, it's not like next week. You probably won't even know what to do with yourself. You're like, yeah, I might take a break today. And maybe a kind of bigger question in terms of like hopes for your career. What are your hopes in general for like the future as well?
My future hopes just kind of tie back to my intention for everything and, you know, what motivates me to do what I do. And I think that I just want to be remembered and I want to be worthy of the people that I feel that I serve. And, you know, again, that's underrepresented communities and women and people of color. And that's who I'm here for. So I want to make us proud.
Well, I think you already are, honey.
I hope so.
You already are, but you know, you say that that's what you want in the future, but I think you already live in that in the present. And just to kind of wrap it up, you know, because obviously this is like a How to Become series, I'm going to wrap it up in terms of like an advice question.
Sure.
Especially during this time, like I'm sure people had all these hopes and dreams of like getting into the industry and kind of now feel a bit hesitant to be like taking that step into maybe fashion or into styling or whatever.
I mean, I think the same advice we've been talking about, which is financials in order, mental health in order, just a preparedness. I graduated during the Great Recession, and I felt like a lesson that I learned at that time was if nothing is secure, you might as well go for what you love and what makes you happy. So prepare yourself for that road, and you can pivot later.
There's never a perfect time. There never ever will be a perfect time. You know, if you always wait for that perfect time, then it's like almost like, you know, if your life is just on hold, like you just put it on pause because, you know, let me just get to hair or let me just do this very quickly, or there's never really a perfect time. Of course, logics, like we've been saying in this whole conversation, which are great logical advice, which is financials and things like that. But in terms of like a perfect time, there never really is. On that note, I want to just obviously thank you so much for joining me on the British Fashion Council x Wonderland How to Become series. Solange, you've been fabulous. People are going to watch this back and just gain knowledge from it, and it's like a real conversation and it's just real advice, real natural conversation. So I just want to thank you so much for your time.
I appreciate you, and I can't wait to see what the people who are watching do, because we're ready to follow your lead, and yeah, we humbly follow. I'm excited for that.
Well, on that note, I'm going to say thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.